Stu, just if you don't know much about my family history, adopted my dad at a very young age. And he lived on this 250-acre farm, and that's where my dad grew up, and eventually that's where I grew up as a kid. And Stu was one of those grandfathers that made a huge impact in my life. While he was not like my blood grandfather, he spent more time investing in my life than so many other people in my life did. I remember when I was younger and my parents didn't have a lot of money, my grandfather would go buy food for us, bring it to us. He would, every school year before we start school, he would take us and buy us our school clothes as we got ready for the next school year. And he was always just so generous and loving towards my family and towards so many other people. And as I got older in middle school and high school, what he would do is every week he would meet us after school and we would go to some restaurant together. He was always a sucker for a good cheeseburger. So if you ever want a Stu to hang out with you, just tell him we're getting a cheeseburger and he'll drive anywhere. So we would do these meals with him and hang out with him every week. And he was always wanting to spend time with my brother and I, take us to get stuff, hang out with us, and just give of himself to us and so many other people. And I loved his example, and so I wrote this essay about him. And as I wrote this essay, I told about all the things that he did for me and that I saw him do for other people. And before I graduated high school, I got to give this essay to my grandfather. And with tears rolling down his eyes, he just was like, "Thank you." And I was like, "No, thank you. Like, you're the reason I wrote this." And he folded this essay up and he put it in his safe. And every time, I would come over, every few times I would catch him opening up his safe and reading this essay to himself. It was just a great reminder, I think, of the impact that he had on my life. And then as I'm graduating high school, he was concerned. I drove this really old Ford Explorer, and we called it the Ford Exploder because we just didn't know where it was going to make it to most days. And so he was nervous because I was going to Bible college in Virginia Beach, which was like 4 hours from my little hometown. And he was like, "Listen, I can't in good conscience send you to school in the Exploder." And I was like, "Listen, it'll be all right. It's fine." And he knew I'm an outdoorsy person. I've always loved Jeeps. And so right before I'm about to graduate high school, I go over his house to say goodbye, and there in the parking lot sat a new to me two-door Jeep Wrangler. And it's something I always wanted. I was so excited, and he surprised me with it as a graduation present. And just his generosity over the years just blew me away. And I remember coming home from Bible college, and he's like, "Listen, I'm halfway through the payments." And I'm like, "Well, I'll try not to wreck it while you're still paying it off." But he was so good to us. He was so good to me, my family, and everybody that was around him. And then as he got older, he eventually had to be put in a nursing home, and I would go visit him time to time. And I remember my last visit with him, and we were spending time together, and I couldn't even walk in the door without him almost putting on a parade for me coming in to see him. He got all the nurse staff, and he's like, come here, I want you to meet my grandson. He's a pastor, and he's doing this and that." And I'm like, "Don't tell him that," but he was just so proud of me and my family and all that he took time to invest in our lives. And when I think about somebody that's generous, I think about him. Well, then came time for, he passed, and we had to attend his funeral. And man, it was just so hard to show up to that because of not having him around anymore. But I remember at his funeral, I was thinking about this. I was like, where did his generosity come from? He was always just so good at giving his time and of himself and of his money, everything. He was always just wanted to be a blessing to other people. And it was cool. During the funeral, the pastor that was giving the service shared about how he would always have this giant Bible. And I think it was maybe the first Bible that was ever written, right? It was huge. I think he got it from Moses. This thing was just sitting on his table. And I saw it there, but the pastor talked about how my grandfather would go over to that table, and he was always in God's word reading it. And then we would hear him at nights, making noises, but we didn't realize he was praying for us and for other people. And that's how he would spend it. He was so close to God. And he's talked about the idea that he was such a blessing to other people was because he realized just how blessed by God that he was. And the big takeaway from his funeral for everybody was one of the Bible verses about Jesus sharing that it's better to give than to receive. And he lived that, he embodied that. And everybody that was around him got to experience that love and generosity. And I share that story with you today as we conclude this series, because for all of us, I think about the idea that we want to be more generous people, right? We want to be more generous to our family and give them our time and our attention. We want to be generous to the world around us to show them what a love from Jesus really looks like. And we want to use our lives not just for ourselves, but to make an impact on other people. And so I'm going to give you the big thought for today's message right up front. And this is what we're going to spend our time talking about as we end this series, because if we could get this, I think it would change the way in which you and I look at our lives and our generosity towards other people. And so here's the big thought I want us to spend our time with. God's generosity to us should overflow through us. Let's say that together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. God's generosity to us should overflow through us. That's the big takeaway from today in this series that I hope that you leave here with. If you forget everything else I say, I hope that you leave here knowing this, because this has the capacity to make a huge impact on your life, on your family's life, and on people around you that interact with you every day if we could understand this one thought. So I say all that today to set up the concluding message of our series, Be Generous. We've been looking at what the Bible teaches about us and our generosity and evaluating just how generous we are. We've been studying the Bible and learning what it teaches about living generous lives towards the world around us and living our lives for God. And I asked you this question as we started week 1 is, are you a generous person? And we spent time answering that each week. Are we generous with our lives? And then the other one is this, is that how would you like to be more generous? I asked you that because a lot of us, we tend to be so selfish sometimes, we forget about using our lives to impact and be generous to the world around us. And I thought about this today. Would anybody, like I wrote that essay about my grandfather, would anybody write an essay about me? And would anybody write an essay about you and the impact that you've had on somebody else's life? Would they or would they not? Some days I would like to say, yeah, I think people would write about me and share that. And other days I'm like, there's no way. And that should be something that helps us and inspires us, not just to live our lives for ourselves, but taking everything that God has given us to be a blessing towards other people. Now, we define generosity as this, week 1. We said it describes a person, an action or amount that is unselfish, that is giving or abundant, and it refers to someone who freely shares time, money, or kindness. And that's what we wanted to make sure that hopefully by the end of this 3 weeks that this would describe you and I more and more. Because if we call ourselves followers of Jesus, this should be the description of our lives because of what God has done for us. And here's some things that we've learned over the last 3 weeks. We've learned that our generosity, it honors God. When we're generous with our lives and the things that He's given us, it honors Him. And then another thing we learned is that generosity is about using our lives to sow and reap, not to keep. It's to sow and reap all these benefits, not just to keep for ourselves, but to extend it to other people. And then lastly, last week we looked at this, how do we be generous? And we said that we use our time, we use our gifts and our talents, the abilities that God's given us, we use our finances and our treasures to honor God with those things first and foremost, and then to make a difference in the lives of other people. And so that's what we spent the last few weeks talking about. And I would just ask you, I hope that these aren't just motivational speeches and we leave here and we continue just to be selfish. I hope that this series isn't just words, but that it's actions that we take to be more generous with our lives, because when we do, like I shared this week 1, we can make an incredible difference in the lives of so many people. So today, has anything changed with you and your heart towards generosity? And if not, I'm going to plead with you one more week that it does, that you take all that God has given you, big or small, and you don't just use it for yourselves, but you use it to the world around you. And that's what we're going to talk about today, the legacy of our generosity and how God has been generous to us. That's what we're going to spend our time talking about. But like I said, before we jump in, if you are new here to Atlee, let me just say welcome. If this is your first time, I especially want to say thank you for being here today. My name is Trey. I'm the pastor here, and it's always an honor and privilege to be up here with you, but also that you entrust us with your church experience today. I know you could be anywhere today, but you chose to be here with us, whether you're watching online or you're here in person. And we just take that very seriously because I know how intimidating and awkward it can be to come to a church or to watch a church. And thank you so much for being with us today. I hope there's something that you take away that is of value for your life and your faith today as you leave here and spend your time with us. Now, I'm also excited. Grace mentioned this a little bit. We are starting our summer series starting next Sunday. And this is always such a fun time for us at Atlee. We have all these guest bands and speakers and all these things that we're doing. And we're literally going to jump in and study a book of the Bible together as a church. And my goal is this, is that by the end of the summer, our entire church has read one of the most important books of the Bible together. And so if you pre-ordered your workbook, great. If not, Grace is going to give you some instructions at the end of that to get that. I want to make sure that every single one of us get one of these so that we as a church can grow in our faith this summer together. So excited about that and what God's going to do over the next few weeks. But as we finish today, let's jump into our last Bible story about generosity. And we're going to learn today about God's generosity towards us, what he has given to you and me. So if you have a Bible, we're going to first open up to 1 John chapter 4. It's toward the end of the New Testament. John wrote several books, and this one's 1 John. And we're going to look at chapter 4, verses 7 through 12. And this verse describes to us the difference that God came to make in our lives and the love that he came to give us. And so I just want you for a moment to listen to the generosity that God has poured out to every single one of us, no matter what our age, no matter what our background, no matter what we've been through, no matter what we've done or haven't done. God's generosity came to give us something that we could never give ourselves. So here we go. 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 through 12. And hopefully this is right. Last week, if you were with us, I messed up the verses on the screen. So thanks for being patient with me. My man Parker here helped me out with that. So let's jump in. Hopefully this is correct this week. It says, "Dear friends, let us love." Everybody say love. Oh, y'all said that so weak. Everybody said love. That sounds a little better. Thank you. Let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God, and whoever does not love does not know God, because God is his love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us. He sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God so loved us, here's our instruction: we also ought to love one another. No one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us and his love is made complete in us. And so I want you to think about that God is first love. And then here's one of the most popular passages. Go to verse 19. It says this: we love because he first loved us. We love because God first loved us. Now, I want you to think about that, because that should help us be encouraged in our generosity and love towards other people, because we first learn God is so generous in his love towards us. He paid the ultimate price and sacrifice to show us just how much we are loved and matter to him. So then you may be asking, what do we do with that news? Like, if God so loved me and so loved you, what is our response to that kind of generosity? Which leads us to another passage we're going to look at real quick, which is a very popular passage in the Bible. It's a moment where Jesus is having an interaction with some religious leaders. They're trying to trap him in conversation. And here's how Jesus responds to them. It says this in Mark chapter 12. It says, one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all of the commandments, Jesus, which is the most important? The most important one, Jesus answered. He says this, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." And then the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. This is known as the great commandment from Jesus himself. If he said there's anything you should spend your life doing, two things, to love God with everything that you have, and then to love other people the same way. This is how much you matter to God. So in these passages, it reminds us and gives us great insight and detail to the love of God. And it reminds us that we can't love unless we have fully understood and received the love of God. That's how we give love away. And so a few thoughts I just want to give you as we conclude this series is the first thing is this, is that never forget how generous God's love has been to you. Never forget how generous God's love has been to you. He showed up and he loved you first. He showed us what real love is all about. He sacrificed so that nothing would ever hold us back from him. He wiped the slate clean. He forgave you. He showed you what love is all about. And he radically showed you how much you matter to him. Being generous always starts with realizing and never forgetting how generous God has been to us. Now, sometimes if you've been a Christ follower for a while, it's easy to forget this. It's easy just to go about our day-to-day lives and just think it's all about us and, thanks God for loving me, but I'm just going to continue doing my thing. Or maybe for some of you, you've never known that God loved you. You're like, God can love somebody like me? Like, I've done some pretty crazy stuff. Like, I really, I thought coming to church today, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I hope that you know no matter who you are, what you've done, God loves you. He's wild about you. And that's why he sent Jesus to prove it to you. And I think so many of us, we just forget how blessed we really are. We're always maybe wanting more or never content, but when we slow down long enough to realize how much God has blessed us with, how much he has cared about us, it really puts generosity in perspective when we realize just how generous God's been to us. And that should pump us up. Like, we should be so excited when we wake up in the mornings, like, God, thank you for another breath. God, thank you for my meal. God, thank you for my house. Like, God, thank you for all these things that I do not deserve. But most of us, we just wake up and we're just like, we just become numb to it or used to it. It's like my dogs. We have 2 little puppies. They're starting to grow up a little bit now. But literally every mealtime, it is like their first mealtime that they've ever had. Like, I pour the dog food, and one of them is literally jumping 3 feet off the ground. And I'm like, what kind of dog did we buy? Like, I hope this thing is okay. And literally every meal, and they're following me, chasing me around the house. I put the dog bowl down, and literally they are scarfing that food down. They are so excited about every meal that we give them. And I'm like, man, I wish we as humans were that excited about our ham sandwiches, Like, why do we take that for granted? The blessings that God gives us every day, like, we should be so excited about everything God's blessed us with instead of, just another meal, another day living in my house. Like, but what if we were like our animal, like we're so excited about the things that God blesses us with? I think it would change the way in which we view our lives. We wouldn't always be worried about getting more. We would realize that, man, what a blessing it is that God has given us everything that we have. And so I hope this week that you slow down long enough just to say, thank you, God, for what you've given me. Maybe your prayers before your meals, like, one, if you're not doing those, man, do those with your family. Take a moment and thank God for your meal, but really thank him for providing for you and taking care of you. And so the first thing I think all of us need to realize is how generous God has been to us, to never forget that. The second thing I hope that we've learned this series that should help us and compel us in generosity is to choose to love God, not with just some parts of our lives, but with every part of our lives. And that's why I love that Jesus says the greatest thing you can do is love God with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, every part of your life. Love God with all of it. And some of us were like, God, you can have this part. Like, you can have my Sunday mornings. I'll go to church for you, but my weekday, God, that's for me, Or, God, you can have, like, this part of my life. Like, I'll come help and do this maybe at the church every now and then, but don't ask me to give or to do anything with that because I don't want anything to do with that. Listen, we don't pick and choose the areas in which we get to be generous. God says every part of you should love him, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength, every single piece of you. I remember our previously pastor, Jeff, he gave this great example one time. He talked about some of us, we love God with like areas of our lives, and it's like a whole pie. And man, I love pie, like U-Crops, that chocolate one. Oh my gosh, gets me every time. But every time I cut it open, just think like you just love God with a piece of your life, right? But literally, like, we're supposed to love God with the whole pie pan. Like, every aspect of our lives, we love and we honor God with. And so, what area have you yet to really love God with? Maybe you love God with this part of your life, but you've yet to fully love him with this stuff. This stuff is maybe a little harder for you to fully give to God. And I would ask you to think about what areas you've yet to surrender to God to truly love him with all of your life. So think about that. Love God with not just some of your life, not just a piece, but with every part. How would that look for you? What do you need to surrender in order for that to happen? Last thought as we conclude this series is this, is to love others with the generous love that God has given us. We're supposed to take the love that God has given us, be so thankful for it, but it was never just meant to be kept to ourselves. It was meant to be given away, that you and I would be able to love others with the generous love that God has given us. Thinking back to my grandfather, the reason I think that he was so generous with me and my family and other people was because he realized how generous God had been to him. And it was easy for him to give of himself because he knew he had been given much. And when you and I slow down long enough to realize how much God has given us, it should be so easy for us to love other people the same way. Well, you don't know, that person's hard to love. I just don't know if I can love them. Well, guess what? You were probably pretty hard to love too, right? But God loved you. He loved all of your stuff, even when you're not patient, even when you're not kind. God still loves you. And so it's up to us to take that love and say, you know what? It's not about me. I'm going to love these people no matter what the outcome is. Now, obviously, sometimes we need to set boundaries in our lives from toxic people and all those things. But the point is this, even Jesus told us, love our enemies. Love people that don't think the way that you do. Love people that maybe act different than you, because the goal is to show them a different kind of love. Love others is hard sometimes, but it's what we're called to do. And so if there's an illustration I want us to leave with is this. I believe our lives should be like sponges. And that's a weird thing to say, right? But I think a lot of us, we come to God and we get all of these amazing blessings. We get forgiveness, we get grace, we get love. And so we come to church and we get filled up, right? And we are, just like, oh, God, thank you for loving me. Thank you for caring for me. And most of us, we're just like, okay, I'll just wait for another Sunday to come back into church. Oh, and get filled up again. Man, I love singing that worship song. It made me feel so good. Oh, man, God, I just reminded of how much you care for me. I am awesome, right? And this is most of the time how we approach our faith. The problem is you keep getting the sponge wet, eventually it's going to get a little gross if it just sits here and just absorbs everything. Eventually what happens is it's got to be wrung out, and it's got to let out some of the water that it absorbed. And so much of our lives should be spent just like this, coming and experiencing God's love, praying and seeing God fill our lives up, so that then what we could do is give it away to other people. God, I want to love other people well. God, I want to give of myself. I want to give of my time, my talents, everything that you've given me. I want to pour it out and be a blessing to other people. And then I come back to you, God, and man, God, you fill me right back up again. But some of y'all, let's just be real. Your sponge is getting a little gross, okay? Because you're just coming and consuming. And you expect everybody else to contribute and to give and to pour out their lives, when yet you have never poured yours out for anybody else other than yourself. And listen, that's not the church I desire us to be. The church that I desire us to be is we come in here on Sundays and man, God, fill us up. Fill us up so that, man, God, we can go back into our schools. God, we can go back into our workplaces. We can go back into our marriages. We can go back into our families. We can go back into those hard, dark places in life, and we can be the light of the world that Jesus called us to be, pouring ourselves out till we're done. And then going back to Jesus saying, Jesus, fill me up again. Not so that I can feel good or, man, feel God's love, but we can experience God's love so that we can continue to give it away. Does your faith look like that today? Or are there some areas that yet God has not been allowed to work through your life? I hope today that you and I, we can be some better sponges, that we can give what's been given to us. Is there anything that you continue to need to give to God? So I'm going to give you a few questions to think about that we've talked about in this series, and I really want you to take these seriously as we spend the next few moments together. The first question is this: do you realize how generous God has been to you? Do you realize how much Jesus has poured into your life? How much he has loved you and cared for you and been there for you? And if you've realized that, if you've had a moment to really come to your senses on that, here's the next question I want us to wrestle with. Is there anything hindering you from being generous with your life? Is there anything hindering you from being generous with your life, taking the love of God and giving it away to other people? Now, as you take a moment to think about those questions, I want to applaud some of you who have stepped up in your generosity in big ways. I've talked to many of the staff members over the last few weeks during this series, and some of you have said, yes, I'll step up, I will serve, I will take my gifts and talents, and I'm going to use it to help other people. And you've done your spiritual gifts test, and you've started to pick an area that you can serve, and man, thank you so much for stepping up. That is such a huge step in your faith. Some of you, you've practiced tithing and giving, and you've taken your finances and things that are near and dear to you, and you've chosen to say, God, I'm going to give you the first. I'm not going to hold back from you, God, what you've given to me. And man, I applaud you. I know that that is a very hard step to make, no matter what season of life that you find yourself in, and that should be celebrated between you and God. Some of you have said, God, I want to be a better example to my kids, to my family. I'm going to put down the phone and I'm going to be present with those people that you've entrusted to me. And those are huge ways that you and I can be generous. And thank you so much. And it's been cool to hear the stories of your generosity. And I want you to be, to ever think about not just those moments, but how those moments compound. One thing leading to another thing, so that you use every part of your life to be generous to other people, because you realize how generous God's been to you. And like I've said since the beginning of this series, great things happen when that takes place. So last question I'm going to give you is this: how can I be more generous? How can you and how can I be more generous as we leave these 3 weeks together? Like I said, I don't want this to be just a great talk. I want it to be action that's applied, because I know the difference that it made in my life and it can make in your life when we put these things that Jesus taught us into play. Last quote here from the Bible, Matthew chapter 5 tells us this. It says, keep open house, be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up to God, this generous Father in heaven. And as you're generous and as you show the world a different way, you show your family a different way, you show this world that there's a difference that we can live by when we're generous, it prompts other people to go, hey, what's up with you and your faith? Something's different about you. How are you so generous with your life? And then it allows you to have those conversations that can change everything for somebody. Because like I said, you never know what your generosity is going to do to impact somebody else's life. And so for those of you who are generous, especially around here at Atlee, I tell you all the time that your generosity goes to making a huge difference in the lives of so many people. And today, I want to introduce you to one of those people that you have made a difference in. Whether you've given here, you've served here, you call this your church home, you help make stories like this happen. And I love the difference that God is making in so many people's lives here. And so we asked Kelsey to sit down with us for a moment and share with us the difference that God's made in her life, and now that she wants to take her life and be generous with it to others. So take a look at this story.
Hi, I'm Kelsey McGann, and this is the story of how I found Jesus. Growing up, my family was very Catholic. We would go to church on Sundays, went to Sunday school, went through the sacraments of faith. And I always wanted a relationship with God. I always thought that was a huge thing that was missing in life, though. I would go to church, but I wasn't there emotionally. I don't think I knew who God was. So fast forward to graduating from high school, I went to Radford University in the fall of 2017 and entered one of the hardest emotional years of my life. I really struggled to find myself, went through a lot of anxiety and depression struggles, and felt lost, truly just hopeless and lost, and I didn't know where to go from there. And so that was something that I really struggled with. I still struggle today with my anxiety and depression, but I've realized that when I found Atlee Church, that's kind of where everything started to change for me. So my mom came to Atlee Church and has been going religiously, I would say, for the last year. And in January, was struggling with life and struggling with really knowing what my next steps were. And she asked me to come to church with her. And at first, I was very closed off to the opportunity of going to church, and I didn't really know what that would look like or if I would feel accepted, or I didn't want to have the same experience that I had in going to Catholic church growing up. That really wasn't the case for me. When I first walked in, Trey was talking about going through life's battles, and I just felt like, okay, God, you're talking to me now. Which I think he always was. I just wasn't ready to open my heart or my ears to listen to him. And then coming every Sunday since and being baptized in March has been a huge part of my life. And even though I still struggle with anxiety and depression at times, I know that I'm not walking through it alone now because I have God. Even this past week, I really struggled with my mental health. I had something personal going on, and it felt really, really heavy. And Sunday, I just sat in my car, and I was just like, okay, you know what? We're just gonna pray on it, and we're gonna go to God. And I just asked if God wanted to remove the thing from my life, then He could, because I trust His guidance and whatever that looks like, and just knowing that I'll be okay no matter what the outcome is. My life without God, had I been in that situation, I would have just shut down. There wouldn't have been really a happy, okay, Kelsey, let's move forward. It would have been okay, I'm just gonna sit in bed all day and cry. A few weeks ago, I started serving on the greeting team, and the funny thing about that is I've always had social anxiety, but I felt a calling to start greeting, and I came in on that Sunday, and I just felt so good doing it and happy, and I loved greeting people and I loved talking to people, and it really gave me something to look forward to. Since being baptized and starting to serve on the greeting team, and coming to church and feeling like I have a relationship with God again, I feel hopeful and optimistic and peaceful. Even though there are hard times, I don't feel alone in them anymore. I know that God hears my struggles, And so being able to pray to him and just ask for the peace that only he can provide has been really, really good for my life. If Jesus can meet me at my lowest, he can meet you at your lowest. It doesn't matter if you've known him your whole life or if you've known him and this is your first day knowing him. Having Jesus in your life is one of the best gifts. And I think that when you fully open your heart to the opportunity to hear him speak to you, that you are greeted with the love and peace that you don't even know about yet until you just trust him. Jesus is my rescue story.
First off, Kelsey, thank you for being so real and being willing to share your story with us. And as a church, I hope that you realize that's the kind of generous church I want us to be, because there are so many people's lives that need the generosity that God has given us. And so I hope that these 3 weeks have challenged you, have encouraged you, but most of all have been a reminder of the amazing blessings and generosity that God has given to us. And I love Kelsey's quote that the best gift that we can be given is our relationship with Jesus.